Using Alpaca, I'm going to convert this sketch into AI art using Photoshop. Now I've got two layers over here. I've got one which is the line work and another which is the complete image, and I drew this a number of years ago for a shirt, and I thought it would be a great example to work with and show you the features we have with Alpaca to do this. So I open up Alpaca on the right over here. I've selected the full canvas, which I basically hit Control A or Command A. If you're not sure, head to Select at the top and All to select your entire canvas. Make sure you have your layer selected, and under Tools here in Alpaca, we go down to Sketch, and we type in our prompt. I've got here Muscle Bound Santa Claus. I'm leaving all of the settings at default, but to show you what that is, although I have 2 images instead of 4, just to speed things up, we've got our sketch layer, which is layer 1 down here. So the line work, sketch type is accurate, that's generally the default. Sketch fidelity is 1, which is the default, and color layers is none. We're going to come to that in a little while. There's also some advanced settings here we don't really need to go through, which is prompt strength, shows you how closely it adheres to the prompt. So basically, if you're not getting what you're prompting, you adjust this, but we're not going to go over that. And tileable just simply creates like a tileable pattern. So we've got everything there. We hit generate, and you see we've got our Santa Claus on the right over here. I've got 2 I can use. I can either click to add one, but I'm going to click add all. If I bring up my layers, I've got 2 versions. This one looks a bit better. And we've got this one. The face, not quite looking as good as we'd like, but we can make some adjustments. This is just the first render. It has done the arms and everything quite well, but what we can do is actually give Alpaca a little more freedom to work, so it's actually done a pretty good job otherwise. So I can actually turn these off if I want to. Go back to selecting our sketch, and it's very important you select that sketch layer, and otherwise it will use the current layer you have selected. We head back to Alpaca, back to Tools, and Sketch. So what we can do now, head down to our advanced settings, and sketch fidelity, how closely the sketch should be followed. Now this is the sketch type. It shows whether it's accurate, rough, or a doodle. It's actually quite accurate because we want to stick to the line work. But I'm going to bring the sketch fidelity down to about 8. And that way it gives Alpaca a little bit more freedom to interpret our sketch. And I'm going to generate, and we'll skip ahead to see what it produces. So now you can see how it's sort of improved things a little bit better. The eyes are a little bit more dark and evil. It looks a bit more like the face is a bit more natural. This one here, not quite as good, but I think this particular image looks fantastic. It has copied the layout of my drawing and created some really stunning artwork. But there's more that we can do. If you have custom models, you can go into Tools, Sketch, and change it to one of these custom models. I'm still going to stick with Alpaca version 3. This time, what I'm going to do is add a bit more style to the prompt. So I can say detailed comic book art. I then make sure I come down and select my sketch layer, and I can see here sketch layer is layer 1, and I hit generate to see what we can produce with the comic book art added to our prompt. And you can see how it's changed that style once again. So you can actually take control of the style of image you're creating pretty effectively. But let's head back. I'm going to remove the detailed comic art, and I'm going to come down. I want my sketch fidelity to be 1, but this time under color layers, I'm going to choose other layers. And if you look at my layers here, I've got a whole bunch of layers, but for now I'm actually going to I'm going to just delete all these generations, and I'll add them in later again. Because now I have this layer with the color. So by choosing layer 1, going back to Alpaca, and choosing other layers, it will reference that other layer for the color to include on this image. One thing I will say though is that it actually can be a little bit too close, so the first generation probably won't look the way we want it to, but I'll leave the color fidelity at about 0.5, which is about the default, and I'm going to hit generate to show you what I mean. So now these colored layers are extremely close to what I created. This is the one I colored a while ago. A little bit more detail, info in there. The colors are almost identical. And what I find really cool is if I take this one here and say move my lines over the top, I can put them on say multiply, and I could even use that as shading for my original image. But we want to experiment a little further and see if we can do something better than just copying the colors we already have, because if we have a more simpler color layer, we want to be able to go a bit further with it. So I'm going to remove these images again, go back to Alpaca, and our color fidelity, I'm going to half it at about 0.25. and see how closely it follows it then. It has strayed a little bit further, but it's still pretty close. Let's bring that fidelity all the way down to 0.1. So you can see it's kept the same basic color palette, but it's a little bit more dynamic. The face is looking a little bit funny, but again, I like the idea of popping my line work over the top, putting on multiply or even color burn and knocking it down a little bit, and using it to create a more dynamic shade for my sketch. But what happens if we change the sketch type to rough? I'm going to pop this layer back on top, put it on normal, and go from the start again, except this time under sketch and accurate, we can now change it to rough. That will grant Alpaca a little bit more freedom in its interpretation. Color layer off, and we're just going to work with the different levels of sort of sketch type. So this is now seen as rough. Let's see if it cleans things up a little bit. Generate. So by choosing rough sketch, we've gone next level with the layout and color. It has that kind of nice glow to it. Santa's missing some teeth in this one, but you can see how we can actually have a lot of fun by changing some of these settings around. So by choosing rough, we get a different interpretation of that image. But there's one more setting. Under rough, there's doodle, but this is a little bit too complex for a doodle, so we're going to actually add in a new image. So I've created this blank canvas, and what I'm essentially going to do is grab my brush tool, grab some black. I'm going to bring my brush size down so I can basically draw a rough scene, which I will quickly speed ahead and do. So I have this scene here. I've drawn, it's very rough, it's a doodle. It's basically like a river along the mountains and trees, and there's a dog over here, or whatever animal it decides to create, with the sun in the sky. So again, I hit Control A to select my canvas. Where I have my sketch type here now, I go to doodle, and I'm going to go up and change my prompt. I have a flowing river in nature surrounded by trees, animals and a dog, sun in center of the sky, clouds bright and sunny, mountains in the distance. I've described the scene I've drawn. I've chosen doodle, and I'm going to click generate and check out what's able to create from my rough drawing. We've got this version here. The first one I think is the best. And you can see the difference when I turn these on or off, or even if I make this semi-transparent. You can see where the lines have been followed, and it's essentially followed the doodle but create a lot of detail within those parameters. So if we try that exact same thing on Muscle Santa, come back. Now, I forgot to change the prompt, so it has added Santa's arms and a dog's face with the whole nature scene. So that's something worth experimenting with too if you wanted to play with that. Thought I might keep that in the video for a bit of fun. But let's go back to our Santa to see what Alpaca produces. And you can see it's produced this totally jacked, awesome Santa Claus. Because it's a doodle, it's gotten a little bit more freedom with the overall layout, but a pretty cool result overall. One thing I'd like to add is that once you've created a generation, you can go down a bit of a rabbit hole. You quite often don't get the best images, but you can simply submit again. If I come down, and this time I'll go from doodle to rough, I can submit again and kind of base my sketch off the generation I just created. So you can continue to build on the images you want to create by simply using them as sketches. Another thing you can do, if you go back to your original sketch, I've got here muscle bound Santa Claus. I can now add in some different elements. Maybe I say glowing neon lights, cyberpunk, 3D render, cinematic realism. I've still got layer 1 selected. I've got rough. I'm going to go sketch fidelity of 0.9. And you can actually take what you've drawn, add something slightly different to see how Alpaca interprets it. And check out the different result we're able to get by changing some of that around. So you can get really creative with your prompts and kind of blend your images into other sort of image styles. So I've dug up a few old pictures of mine and experimented on this to see what results I could get, just having to play around with some of the basic settings, and you'd be surprised exactly what Alpaca will do with some of these images. So I highly recommend doing that. If you're not sure what you want to do, just have a play with some old pictures or draw some doodles and just type in some information, see what you come up with. Otherwise, that's the video for today, guys. I hope you found it useful. Hope you found it enjoyable and interesting. There is a link to Alpaca in the description below if you want to check that out. Otherwise, thanks for watching the video. Hope to see you again soon. Have a great day.